I have been at work all day, blasting and digging in one of our new claims, Dashaway, which I don't think a great deal of, but which I am willing to try. We are down now 10 or 12 feet. It must have been disheartening work, picking away at the flinty ledges. There is no further mention of the Dashaway, but we hear of the Flyaway, the Annipolitan, the Live Yankee, and of many another, each of which holds out a beacon of hope for a brief moment, then passes from notice forever. Still, he was not discouraged. Once he wrote, "I am a citizen here, and I am satisfied, though Ratio and I are strapped and we haven't 3 days' rations in the house. I shall work the Monitor and the other claims with my own hands. The pick and shovel are the only claims I have confidence in now," he wrote later. "My back is sore and my hands are blistered with handling them to-day." His letters began to take on a weary tone. Once, in midsummer, he wrote that it was still snowing up there in the hills, and added, "It always snows here, I expect. If we strike it rich, I've lost my guess, that's all." And the final heartsick line, "Don't you suppose they have pretty much quit writing at home?" In time he went to work in a quartz mill at $10 a week, though it was not entirely for the money, as in Roughing It he would have us believe. Samuel Clemens learned thoroughly what he undertook, and he proposed to master the science of mining. From Phillips and Higbie he had learned what there was to know about prospecting. He went on to the mill to learn refining, so that when his claims developed he could establish a mill and personally superintend the work. His stay was brief. He contracted a severe cold and came near getting poisoned by the chemicals. Recovering, he went with Higbie for an outing to Mono Lake, a ghastly, lifeless, alkali sea among the hills, vividly described in Roughing It. At another time he went with Higbie on a walking trip to the Yosemite, where they camped and fished undisturbed, for in those days few human beings came to that far isolation. Discouragement did not reach them there. Amid that vast grandeur and quiet the quest for gold hardly seemed worth while. Now and again that summer he went alone into the wilderness to find his balance and to get entirely away from humankind. In Roughing It, Mark Twain tells the story of how he and Higbie finally located a blind lead, which made them really millionaires until they forfeited their claim through the sharp practice of some rival miners and their own neglect. It is true that the Wide West claim was forfeited in some such manner, but the size of the loss was magnified in Roughing It to make a good story. There was never a fortune in Wide West except the one sunk in it by its final owners. The story as told in Roughing It is a tale of what might have happened, and ends the author's days in the mines with a good story-book touch. The mining career of Samuel Clemens really came to a close gradually, and with no showy climax. He fought hard and surrendered little by little, without owning, even to the end, that he was surrendering at all. It was the gift of resolution that all his life would make his defeats long and costly, his victories supreme. By the end of July the money situation in the Aurora camp was getting desperate. Orion's depleted salary would no longer pay for food, tools, and blasting powder, and the miner began to cast about for means to earn an additional sum, however small. The Josh letters to the Enterprise had awakened interest as to their author, and Orion had not failed to let Josh's identity be known. The result had been that here and there a coast paper had invited contributions and even suggested payment. A letter written by the Aurora miner at the end of July tells this part of the story. "My debts are greater than I thought for. The fact is, I must have something to do, and that shortly, too. Now write to the Sacramento Union folks, or to Marsh, and tell them that I will write as many letters a week as they want, for $10 a week. My board must be paid. Tell them I have corresponded with the New Orleans Crescent and other papers and the Enterprise. If they want letters from here, who'll run from morning till night collecting material cheaper? I'll write a short letter twice a week, for the present, for the Age, for $5 per week. Now it has been a long time since I couldn't make my own living, and it shall be a long time before I loaf another year." This all led to nothing. But about the same time the Enterprise assistant already mentioned spoke to Joseph T. Goodman, owner and editor of the paper, about adding Josh to their regular staff. Joe Goodman, a man of keen humor and literary perception, agreed that the author of the Josh letters might be useful to them. One of the sketches particularly appealed to him, a burlesque report of a Fourth of July oration. "That is the kind of thing we want," he said. "Write to him, Barstow, and ask him if he wants to come up here." Barstow wrote, offering $25 a week, a tempting sum. This was at the end of July, 1862. Yet the hard-pressed miner made no haste to accept the offer. To leave Aurora meant the surrender of all hope in the mines, the confession of another failure. He wrote Barstow, asking when he thought he might be needed, and at the same time, in a letter to Orion, he said, "I shall leave at midnight tonight, alone and on foot, for a walk of 60 or 70 miles through a totally uninhabited country. But do you write Barstow that I have left here for a week or so, and in case he should want me, he must write me here, or let me know through you." He had gone into the wilderness to fight out his battle alone, postponing the final moment of surrender that, had he known, only meant the beginning of victory. He was still undecided when he returned 8 days later and wrote to his sister Pamela a letter in which there is no mention of newspaper prospects. Just how and when the end came at last cannot be known, but one hot, dusty August afternoon in Virginia City, a worn, travel-stained pilgrim dragged himself into the office of the Territorial Enterprise, then in its new building on C Street, and, loosening a heavy roll of blankets from his shoulder, dropped wearily into a chair. He wore a rusty slouch hat, no coat, a faded blue flannel shirt, a navy revolver. His trousers were tucked into his boot-tops. A tangle of reddish-brown hair fell on his shoulders. A mass of tawny beard, dingy with alkali dust, dropped halfway to his waist. Aurora lay 130 miles from Virginia City. He had walked that distance, carrying his heavy load. Editor Goodman was absent at the moment, but the other proprietor, Dennis E. McCarthy, asked the caller to state his errand. The wanderer regarded him with a far-away look and said absently and with deliberation, "My starboard leg seems to be unshipped. I'd like about 100 yards of line. I think I'm falling to pieces." Then he added, "I want to see Mr. Barstow or Mr. Goodman. My name is Clemens, and I've come to write for the paper." It was the master of the world's widest estate, come to claim his kingdom. End of chapter 20.